This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick.
This is Chapter 19 of The Fires of Heaven, Memories, and our symbol is the ruby-hilted dagger.
Which is because we get a Fane perspective here at the end of the chapter. Which is interesting that the logo definitely refers to Fane, but the title of the chapter is for Morghese.
Yeah.
Interesting confluence of where the two really don't have any relevance to each other. One is about one part of the chapter, and the other is about the other part of the chapter.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about it. My queen? Morghese looked up from the book on her lap. Sunlight slanted through the window of the sitting room next to her bedchamber. The day was already hot, with no breeze, and sweat dampened her face. It would be noon before much longer, and she had not stirred from the room. That was unlike her. She could not remember why she had decided to laze the morning away with a book. She seemed unable to concentrate on reading of late. By the golden clock on the mantel above the marble fireplace, an hour had passed since she last turned a page, and she could not recall its words. It must be the heat. The red-coated young officer of her guards, kneeling with one fist pressed to the red and gold carpet, looked vaguely familiar. Once she had known the name of every guard assigned to the palace. Perhaps it was all the new faces. Talonvor, she said, surprising herself. He was a tall, well-made young man, but she could not tell why she remembered him in particular. Had he brought someone to her once? Long ago? Guardsman Lieutenant Martin Talonvor. He gazed at her, startlingly rough-eyed, before putting his gaze back on the carpet. My queen, forgive me, but I am surprised that you remain here, given the morning's news. What news? It would be good to learn about something besides Altima's gossip of the Terran court. At times she felt that there was something else she wanted to ask the woman, but all they ever did was gossip, which she could never remember doing before. Gabriel seemed to enjoy listening to them, sitting in that tall red chair in front of the fireplace with his ankles crossed, smiling contentedly. Altima had taken to wearing rather daring dresses. Morghese would have to say something to her. Dimly, she seemed to remember thinking that before. Nonsense. If I had, I would have spoken to her already. She shook her head, realizing that she had drifted away from the young officer entirely, that he had begun speaking and stopped when he saw she was not listening. Tell me again. I was distracted. And stand. He rose, face angry, eyes burning on her before they dropped again. She looked where he had been staring and blushed. Her dress was cut extremely low, but Gabriel liked her to wear them so. With that thought, she ceased fretting about being nearly naked in front of one of her officers. Be brief, she said curtly. How dare he look at me in that manner? I should have him flogged. What news is so important that you think you can walk into my sitting room as if it were a tavern? His face darkened, but whether from proper embarrassment or increased anger, she could not say. How dare he be angry with his queen? Does the man think all I have to do is listen to him? Rebellion, my queen, he said in a flat tone, and all thought of anger and stares vanished. Where? The two rivers, my queen. Someone has raised the old banner of Manetherin, the Red Eagle. A messenger came from Whitebridge this morning. Morghese drummed her fingers on the book, her thoughts coming more clearly than it seemed they had in a very long time. Something about the two rivers, some spark she could not quite fan to life, tugged at her. The region was hardly a part of Andor at all, and had not been for generations. She and the last three queens before her had been hard-pressed to maintain a modicum of control over the miners and smelters in the Mountains of Mist, and even that modicum would have been lost had there been any way to get the metals out, save through the rest of Andor. A choice between holding the mine's gold and iron and other metals, and keeping the two rivers' wool and tabac had not been difficult. But rebellion unchecked, even rebellion in part of her realm that she ruled only on a map, could spread like wildfire to places that were hers in fact, and Manetherin, destroyed in the Trolloc Wars, Manetherin of legend and story, still had a hold on some men's minds. Besides, the two rivers was hers. If they had been left to go their own way for far too long, they were still a part of her realm. Has Lord Gabriel been informed? Of course he had not. He would have come to her with the news, and suggestions on how to deal with it. His suggestions were always clearly right. Suggestions? Somehow it seemed that she could remember him telling her what to do. That was impossible, of course. He has, my queen. Talonvor's voice was still bland, unlike his face, where slow anger yet smoldered. He laughed. He said the two rivers seemed to throw up trouble, and that he would have to do something about it one day. He said this minor annoyance would have to wait its turn before more important matters. The book fell as she sprang to her feet, and she thought Talonvor smiled in grim satisfaction as she swept by him. Thought I'd cut it there, like halfway through that paragraph. I think I misspoke before this, by the way, and said this was the part with Linny. Linny's in a few pages.
Right. Yeah. But you did highlight that section out to read, I think you were saying.
Yeah, totally.
And this is the first of many, many, many times I'm going to say this episode. Morghese is under compulsion, and she is slowly managing to escape from it through, I would assume, strong emotion about the rebellion in her country, or what she perceives as rebellion in her country. Also, we can say, maybe a little bit of Perrin doing some Ta'Veren tugging, saying, hey, I need you to judge a trial in the future, so get your ass over here.
It's very interesting to see Morghese's perspective in this chapter for a couple of different reasons. One, as there were these fun little things where it takes her a minute to remember who Talonvor is, but she finally does. And she keeps dismissing what has been happening as impossible. Mm-hmm. I just thought it was interesting where whatever Ravine's style of compulsion is, it's almost like she's just constantly drugged. Like, she's herself, but she can't think clearly. When this chapter opens, she's been staring at the same page in a book for an hour and not reading it. An hour? You know what I mean? Sometimes you space out for a minute, 2, 5, maybe, but not an hour. Like, not unless you're wicked high. You know what I mean? So
wait,
it's
what?
hinting.
Sorry, I spaced out there for an hour.
What?
I do notice she comments that Talonvor brought someone to her once, and we know that's Rand.
Yeah.
Oh, she thinks that's significant.
Especially with the pairing of the news about Emond's Field, it was kind of fun that she remembers Talonvor being associated with that somehow, but she can't quite put it together.
Okay, Aradia's yelling at me and said it was Matt. I don't know what you're talking about, because I'm talking about when Rand fell over the wall and he was picked up in the garden, and Talonvor was summoned.
Fair enough, Aradia, fair enough.
So what are you referring to? You're referring to a time when Matt went in there? I'm trying to remember when he goes. Because he remembers the wall. I guess he remembers the story about the wall and uses it to climb and brings the letter. Does Talonvor bring him as well? Yes, he does. I remember that. So yeah, who knows? That's a good point. Thank you for Aradia for bringing up that as well, although you could have done it in a slightly nicer way.
So Morghese rushes off to go confront Gabriel about having received this news and not telling her. And in a uncomfortable scene to read, Morghese rushes in and starts giving commands like she's herself for a minute. Sorry,
I want to pause for a second and really talk about what Gabriel's doing to her, because it's physical rape, it's mental rape, he is taking her identity away from her, her power away from her, and the choice away from her. But at the same time, I almost feel like it's less evil than Grendel, because Grendel at least takes away everything that makes you who you are. This is almost just you are who you are, but you lack any sort of agency. And that's way more terrifying.
Right. He doesn't want... Oh man, I can't think of a way to say this that isn't gross, but it is gross. He doesn't want puppets. He wants playmates,
playthings.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got half a dozen women that he's sleeping with, and they're all under compulsion, and at least under power compulsion. He likes having Altima and Morghese. I keep saying Morghese.
He tells them to sit together and gossip, and he just watches them because, they're whatever, adorable prey animals to him.
Tugging on his ear and humming. Oh, wait, no, that's Louis Theron.
We talk about this from time to time, but I feel like RJ's really good at taking these really dark things and kind of telling the story in such a way that it doesn't... He's not telling you that this is dark or evil or bad. This is just what's happening. You decide what that means. You know what I mean? I like that about it. Whereas many other fantasy authors will tell you what to think, or based on, a wise character enters at the end of the chapter and explains everything to everyone, or right. that kind of thing. Not that never happens in this book, but even that wise character, usually Moraine or Tom, are wrong about things sometimes,
Well, and a lot of times he talks about something like this, which is a horrific experience. And, we see Morghese suffer the effects of this for a long, long time. I mean, she doubts herself and undercuts her own profession for a long time, her own professionalism for a long time, just because, she doesn't understand how she could make the choices that she's made. But at the same time, the first time I read through this, none of that was very obvious to me. I knew there was some compulsion going on, and I knew she fled, but I didn't really think about the trauma that was creating in her head.
Just how rapey that is.
Yeah.
Again, at a loss for words. I don't know how to talk about this nicely. Maybe that's impossible.
I mean, I think it is impossible because it's not a nice thing.
Yeah.
When we talk about the fact that Wheel of Time is not as dark of Game of Thrones, it's not because dark things aren't happening in the story. I would say if you actually look at what's happening, more people suffer and die and are tortured.
In way more awful ways.
Way more awful ways in the Wheel of Time. But because it's not on the page necessarily.
Yeah, like we like to say, there's no murder porn in here. This isn't murder porn, but there is a lot of murder. But you can do that in a way that's not, I don't know how to say this, exploitative, but that's not quite the right way. In a way that just isn't egregious.
Yeah, I feel like that we have seen a lot of fantasy go into the egregious violence realm with the success of Game of Thrones. And Game of Thrones only worked because it was genre breaking. It was different than the norm. And now it's sort of become the norm. And so when I read another murder porn, I'm just like, I don't care. You're not doing anything, you're not doing anything edgy anymore. You're just following the pack.
Yeah, I enjoyed that when I first read Game of Thrones too, that it was just like, oh, this is cool. Like, this is a well-built fantasy world with characters with some depth and stuff, and there's also,
no plot armor.
Hookers and blackjack.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean? Literally. And
yeah. So basically, Martin was like, I'll make my own Wheel of Time with hookers and blackjack.
I'll make my own Wheel of Time. Hookers and blackjack. But yeah, I mean, he did, so.
Yeah. In fair, there's an awful lot of blackjack in Wheel of Time. Matt plays the fuck out of various card games. And I'm guessing a few of those tavern maidens who will sleep with him for, a coin. There's not...
Is that what's happening? So that's not ever explicitly stated either,
That's not. Do you think...
I would imagine yes and no. You see what I'm getting at? Some places, yes, maybe, or in other places, she's just a waitress that wants to go home with him,
Right, but in some places, the house takes a cut.
A lot of gray area, probably. Yeah. And there's some cute stuff in here, allusions to more adulty things. In a minute here, I'm sure we'll talk more about it when we get there, but Morghese is thinking about Linny after they had been talking, and she remembers that one of her sayings is that men are only good for 3 things, but Morghese took the throne before Linny ever thought she was old enough to tell her what those 3 things that men are good for are. So she's... Speculate?
Do you want to tell me what those 3 things are? Yeah. Well, she says one of them flat out.
Oh, does she?
Dancing.
Oh, dancing.
Because she says, if only I just kept to dancing, things would have turned out better.
Oh, I just thought that's Morghese thinking, if I had never slept with these men, the relationships probably wouldn't have blown up so dramatically,
Well, it's just the timing of when she says it. She says, "Oh, Linny told me."
My guess when I read that before was probably because Linny's the quote is something like, "Men are only good for 3 things, and they're very good for those 3 things." Mm-hmm. So Bladen's saying dancing, sex, and babies. Babies is not something I thought of. My thought was she's probably saying something like
dancing, fighting, and fucking.
Oh. Lifting heavy things, sex, and getting you into trouble, or something like that. lifting heavy things, making babies, and making trouble for you.
Yeah, except for the fact that they do. I mean, the dancing is pretty clear. Yeah. And babies and sex to her are going to pretty much be getting you with babies is what she's going to call it. But yeah, I'm pretty confident that it's fighting, fucking, and dancing. I need an F term for dancing. Flouncing, fighting, fucking, and flouncing.
Flouncing?
Frolicking.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves. I mean, this scene, I feel like we can just sort of glaze over where Morghese storms in on Gabriel/Ravine, says, we need to speak in private.
She talks about how she had to make a choice between holding the gold mines and the silver mines in the Mountains of Mist and keeping the two rivers, Tabak and Sheep.
Right.
And she went after the gold, and that's partially why the two rivers is been left untouched, is that she sort of had to make a decision to go after...
Because there's no money in it.
There's no money. It's like wool and tobacco just aren't worth that much money. So
not as much as gold and iron.
Clearly.
Morghese storms in on Gabriel, who's entertaining guests who are all Morghese's old enemies, and says, get everyone out of here. We have to speak about this thing. And Ravine's like, everything's fine, dear. Why don't you return to your rooms while the adults are talking, more or less? And Morghese is like, why don't you shut your mouth, basically? And Ravine loses his shit. He runs across the room and he's yelling at her. It seems like he says, you will go and wait for me. I will come to you this evening. You will go now. You will go. And I imagine he's reapplying the adhesive there. He's realized it's worn off.
The compulsion, totally. Well, if you read the sentence right before that, she was unable to look at anything but his dark eyes. Her skin tingled as if an icy wind were blowing through the courtyard.
Oh, I'm glad he said that because I didn't even catch that.
His voice was a distant roar filling her ears. All of that is very much, he is dosing her with compulsion, right? Just another solid dose and saying, go lay down. Don't deal with the fact that I'm arranging with all of your enemies to overthrow you right now. Don't think about that. And the fact that she does break it. I mean, she's able to, I think what she does, and this is sort of interesting, but I think he makes a mistake by saying you will go, because she's able to turn that into you will leave the chamber into you will leave the keep.
Oh, yeah. And, but in any case, that's a good point. His last command, you will go now, you will go, is not specific.
Yeah, not specific enough.
And she does go.
All the way away.
She had one hand lifted to open the door of her sitting room before she realized where she was and what had happened. He had told her to go, and she had gone.
And I do think it is her will that allows her to go. I think it's not necessarily, if she'd been following the compulsion to a T, she would have gone to the room and waited for him, because he does say that. And so her will is strong enough to break at least part of the compulsion. It's not entirely 100% him making a mistake, but I do think the wording of that allowed her to sort of use her own mind to sort of break the compulsion, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. She keeps realizing that something is wrong, which is something you absolutely don't want to happen to someone you're trying to compel. If they somehow realize the facts don't add up, they say a person with a strong mind can start to think their way out.
Right. And this is not a first time for her. We saw her trying to send a message through Matt. Remember that message that didn't make any sense?
Yep.
About, what was it, I hope
Fawn
you enjoy...
Fawn chats in Shiriam study or something
right,
like that?
Right. And we were like, oh, it's a secret message.
I strongly believe that we nailed that one.
Totally. And here, too, I think that she's just finally found a crack to get through that her mind has been fighting all this time. Ravine has commented, I've got this person who's constantly fighting against the compulsion, and if I didn't need her, I'd just, brain fry her. But
she has to appear to be at least alive,
Mm-hmm. She has to function until he can really overthrow her, right? I think he was planning on taking her out pretty soon, and she just barely got away with her life.
Yeah, I also had the thought here, and as we move forward, so Morghese finds herself at the door of her sitting room, and she's like, what the hell just happened? I can't believe that this just... And she just starts wandering down the hall, and she just eventually finds herself walking into Linny's, retiree apartment. And it made me think that, because there's all this, Linny speaks to her like a child, but Linny raised her grandmother, her mother, and her. And I thought it was interesting, and I sort of had the thought, I'm sure everyone can look back in their mind at some point in your childhood where you were running around playing with your friends or whatever, and you got scared or someone got hurt or something like that, and you're just find yourself sprinting, and before you know it, you're in front of your mom. You run straight to mommy.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh my gosh, this thing happened. I wonder what I should do. Well, here are my options. No, you're just running, and before you realize what happened, you're in front of your mom, and that is exactly what Morghese did. So and she's still kind of fried. She's not really thinking, but she just kind of instinctively went to a safe place, and that's how I interpreted this. Because even in Morghese's childhood, she wouldn't have run to her mother when something scary happened. She would have gone to Linny. Her mother was the queen.
Linny is her mother, yeah.
Or her mother was an important person, not the queen. But
right. Well, a noble at the very least.
Yeah, a high-powered noble. A step below. But in any case, I just thought that was interesting. I wanted to put it out there.
I like it. I like it a lot. I think it's interesting that she notices, she's got these 7 opponents, and we see them become an issue for Rand later when he takes over.
Oh, yeah. It was not until she saw the aged faces in the hallway around her, the creased cheeks and often bent backs, that she became aware of where she was. The pensioners' quarters. Some servants returned to their families when they grew old, but others had been so long in the palace that they could think of no other life. Here, they had their own small apartments, their own shaded garden, and a spacious courtyard. Like every queen before her, she supplemented their pensions by letting them buy food through the palace kitchens for less than it cost, and the infirmary treated their ills. Creaky bows and unsteady curtsies followed her, and murmurs of, "The light shine upon you, my queen," and "The light bless you, my queen," and "The light protect you, my queen." She acknowledged them absently. She knew where she was going now. Linny's door was like all the others along the green-tiled corridor, unadorned save for a carving of the rearing lion of Andor. She never thought of knocking before entering. She was the queen, and this was her palace. Her old nurse was not there, though a tea kettle steaming over a small fire in the brick fireplace said she would not be long. The 2 snug rooms were neatly furnished, the bed made to perfection, the 2 chairs precisely aligned at the table, where a blue vase in the exact center held a small fan of greenery. Linny had always been a great one for neatness. Morghese was willing to wager that within the wardrobe, in the bedchamber, every dress was arranged just so with every other, and the same for pots in the cupboard beside the fireplace in the other room. 6 painted ivory miniatures in small wooden stands made a line on the mantelpiece. How Linny could have afforded them on a nurse's stipend was more than Morghese had ever been able to imagine. She could not ask such a question, of course. In pairs, they showed 3 young women, and the same 3 as babes. Elaine was there, and herself, taking down the portrait of herself at 14, a slender filly of a girl. She could not believe that she had ever looked so innocent. She had worn that ivory silk dress the day she had gone to the White Tower, never dreaming at the same time that she would be queen, only harboring the vain hope she might become Aes Sedai. Absent-mindedly, she thumbed the great serpent ring on her left hand. She had not earned that, precisely. Women who could not channel were not awarded the ring, but short of her 16th name day, she had returned to contest the Rose Crown in the name of House Ch19, and, when she won the throne nearly 2 years later, the ring had been presented to her. By tradition, the daughter heir of Andor always trained in the Tower, and in recognition of Andor's long support of the Tower, was given the ring, whether or not she could channel. She had only been heir to House Ch19 in the Tower, but they gave it to her anyway once the Rose Crown was on her head. Replacing her own portrait, she took down her mother's, taken at perhaps 2 years older. Linny had been nurse to 3 generations of Ch19 women. Magdalene Ch19 had been beautiful. Morghese remembered that smile, when it had become a mother's loving beam.
So the one thing I want to say about her receiving the ring that always confused me is because, we hear all over and over again, the daughter heir trains in Tarvalin and gets the ring, whether or not she can actually channel.
Right.
And you think that's why Morghese has the ring, but then you think back, and she was never the daughter heir. She went to the tower and trained when...
And then the daughter heir disappeared.
Where Tigraine was supposed to be the daughter heir. So she actually went and trained, was told, you don't have enough power, basically kicked out, went back to being a noble, and then achieved the crown. And only once she had the crown did they give her that ring.
Right.
So that was always a confusing point for me, where I was like, wait a minute. If she wasn't the daughter heir, how did she get the ring? And it's like actually one of those things where she only got the ring much, much later. And she didn't get it when she was training.
And guys, I just look at this like, you know, like Adidas wants LeBron to wear their shoes. Like, if LeBron wears those shoes, then lots of people are going to think Adidas is a good brand and they want to wear it too. And it's the same with the tower in Andor. If the ruling monarch of this nation supports the tower, then it makes the tower look that much more powerful. You know what I mean?
It's also a long-standing tradition, right? I mean, if you go back and look at the history of Caemlyn and Tarvalin and the way they've supported each other, Caemlyn was always the first to have an open Aes Sedai advisor.
True.
And they do openly associate. But that is what led to all of the riots and the stuff that Rand walked into back in Eye of the World in Andor. And those riots eventually led to the rise of Gabriel.
Yeah, there's some contention over it. A lot of people don't like the politics of the tower, and that's fully understandable.
And I do think a big part of Morghese's saying absolutely no Aes Sedai is part of the compulsion. Like, because Gabriel, she, like, loves the fact that her daughter is doing well in the tower and is so proud of that, but at the same time hates all Aes Sedai. And that hating all Aes Sedai just seems an irrational compulsion thing that she really has no control over.
I think so, yeah. I mean, she's also enraged that her daughter seems to be being hidden from her.
I get that, but I also think that a lot of that rage is enhanced by the compulsion. I think that that's just an excuse that Gabriel was using in order to drive a wedge between and get basically all the White Tower advisors kicked out because he didn't want to deal with them. I think
you're right. And to have people around who might be able to notice or understand what's happening.
Yeah, with the channeling.
Yeah.
It does remind me a little bit of Hawkwing as well, since just like Ishmael was, you know, they say whispering in his ear, but I assume using a little bit of compulsion on Hawking to make him hate Aes Sedai.
Replacing her own portrait, she took down her mother's. Taken at perhaps 2 years older, Lenny had been nurse to 3 generations of Traken women. Magdan Traken had been beautiful. Morghese could remember that smile, when it had become a mother's loving beam. It was Magdan who should have had the Lion Throne, but a fever had carried her away, and a young girl had found herself high seat of House Traken, in the middle of a struggle for the throne with no more support in the beginning than her house retainers and the house bard.
Tom.
I won the Lion Throne. I will not give it up, she's thinking to herself, and I will not see a man take it. For 1,000 years a queen has ruled Andor, and I will not let that end now. Meddling in my things again, are you, child? That voice triggered long-forgotten reflexes. Morghese had the miniature hidden behind her back before she knew it, with a rueful shake of her head. She put the portrait back on its stand. I am not a girl in the nursery any longer, Lenny. You must remember that, or one day you will say something where I must do something about it. My neck is scrawny and old, Lenny said, setting a net bag of carrots and turnips on the table. She looked frail in her neat gray dress, her white hair drawn back in a bun, from a narrow face with skin like thin parchment, but her back was straight, her voice was clear and steady, and her dark eyes as sharp as ever. If you want to give it to a hangman or a headsman, I'm almost done with it anyway. Just wanted to, that's it. That was the line.
So badass, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Cut my head off. Not going to do any good.
Oh, yeah, you're going to kill me? Okay.
Yeah, right. I'm an old lady anyway.
Not going to need this thing in a couple years.
Yeah. No, Lenny's wisdom is great.
All
her little sayings. And it's amazing. We've gotten so many Lenny sayings, and Nynaeve already wants to meet her, that we kind of felt like we know her already, even though this is the first time we've actually met Lenny in the flesh, so to speak.
I didn't include it, but immediately after, Lenny says, "A gnarled old branch dulls the blade that severs a sapling."
Gotta love those
basically
sayings.
Saying, like, good luck finding an axe that's sharp enough to get through this leather hide.
And then, of course, we get the whole, hey, you haven't been here for months. And she's like, but I come here every week. And she's like, no, you don't. Not anymore. Yeah, and so during this whole conversation, Linny knows that Gabriel is basically sleeping with a bunch of different women. Morghese hasn't put that together, but Morghese has put together that Gabriel's trying to overthrow her throne. And so there's one of those, like, it's almost a classic buddy comedy type conversations where they're, like, talking about two different things, and they're like, wait, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And it's like, yeah, figuring out that Gabriel's actually both sleeping with a bunch of women and trying to overthrow the throne is pretty heartbreaking to Morghese there.
Yeah, in this conversation, basically, Morghese keeps having these assumptions and Linny keeps correcting her. Like, yeah, you used to do that all the time. I haven't seen you much in 6 months, though. Mm-hmm. And,
Are you feeling all right? Seem to not remember much. Yeah. When the honey's out of the comb, there's no putting it back. And then this sort of Gabriel spends most of his nights with you, but Altima has nearly as much of his time. He spreads himself thin with the other 6. 5 have rooms in the palace. 1, a big-eyed young thing. Big-eyed. He sneaks in and out for some reason, all swaddled in a cloak, even in this heat. Perhaps she has a husband. Better to face the bear than to run from it.
Yep. Man, how does he get anything else done? I'm not even trying to be funny. 6 lovers? Or wait, is that a total of 8? Or is that's a total of 8, isn't it?
That's a total of 8, yeah. One for each day of the week and a spare.
Jesus. You just how does he find the time? He's trying to overthrow a empire and assemble his loyal subjects and shit, like...
Dude, that's why Morghese was number 1. He just walked in and snapped her up, and like he's been turning the place over for a while. After a while, ruling the world gets boring. He's just so good at it. What can you say?
Yeah.
I mean, Ravin actually is a very effective fighter. He takes out Matt. He takes out Avienda. Like, that lightning strike that he does is, if he hadn't gotten Balefire, would have been one of the more effective attacks against the Shadows of the Light. Not to mention, taking over one of the most powerful countries, Camelin, with the biggest army. Like, yeah, he seems to be highly effective. He's doing great. If Rand hadn't tracked him down and, put him down like a dog, or if Nynaeve hadn't, captured Moghedien and used a ball of fire against him, I mean, he basically had, like, 3 of the most powerful channelers going up against him at once.
The nation is his, and I suspect that his game is to, well, first control Morghese, and then through Morghese, that lends him the legitimacy to give orders, if it's presumably coming from her or he has permission from her to do this. But
totally
over time, he has to assemble enough of the houses on his side so that he can fully take control in his own name.
And he's done that by exiling every one of the houses aligned with Morghese, giving them punishments, using her to basically turn against all of her allies and promote all of her enemies. And meanwhile, he's being like, wow, isn't she making these bad decisions? Maybe it's not a good idea to have a queen. She's just making these really stupid decisions that I'm making her do. But you should really overthrow her and put me in charge because I make better decisions. It's slimy as hell, but effective. And, if you've got an effective plan in place, what else is there to do but create a harem?
And if you're going to be an evil ruler, I mean, I feel like a harem is kind of required.
Well, it's definitely evil.
And Linny fills her in on all of this stuff. Like, one of Morghese's first instincts is to say, like, holy shit, this is happening. Like, I have to assemble my people. Like, where is Lord Pelivar? Where is Lord Abel? And she asks, she lists many names. And Linny's like, yeah, you exiled all those. And one guy demanded that he know why, and you had him publicly beat and flogged, was the word.
And these are eventually names that, for the most part, Elaine is able to get back on her side when she takes back over. Some of them she loses permanently, but I don't really know that it's worth going into the politics of that here.
Not really. I do remember, I think Lord Pelivar dies.
Yeah, his son basically ends up.
His young son is one of Elaine's first, houses that comes to her.
Mm-hmm. It's the sporting houses. And I think, isn't there a whole group of like 4 or something, like, young house leaders, because all the old ones have been killed in the various battles?
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah, and they all turn over to her side. So, partially just basically all the people that Morghese abuses and exiles end up dead, so it's less of an issue, I guess.
Shortly after that is the thing I brought up before. Another thing that Lenny sometimes said was that men were only good for 3 things, though very good for those. She had been on the throne before Lenny had thought her old enough to tell her what the 3 things were. Oh, I guess that does imply that she did eventually tell her what they are.
And then right after that...
Perhaps if I'd kept to the dancing, she thought wryly, I'd not have so much trouble with them. Yeah, that implies that dancing is 1.
Right.
The other 2 are, yeah.
And we all know fucking's 1, because...
Right.
Yeah.
They're 2 straight women, and they're like, men are only good for 3 things. Well, one of them is probably, yeah.
Yeah. But the third one remains a mystery. I still think it's fighting. I think it's you send them off to war. You know,
it could very well be that. I wanted to say, like, lift heavy things or trouble. That sounds like something Lenny would say, too.
But all those sort of fall in the fighting, trouble, lifting heavy things, opening jars, like all that sort of falls in the like the physical, me beat things over and be strong, like the physicalness of being a man.
Weevils is saying opening jars. I'm guessing that comes from life experience, Weevils. At this point, Morghese sends Linny to go find Talonvor, who, after this long conversation, she realizes maybe like one of her only loyal subjects in the entire kingdom left. Or at least in the city.
Yeah, the only one of the guards, anyway, certainly.
That she knows she can trust, so
mm-hmm.
She sends Linny to go get him, and I just really liked when Linny comes back. She says, he didn't want to come with me at first, she said. 50 years ago, I suppose I could have shown what you are displaying to the world, and he'd have followed quick enough, but now I must needs use sweet reason. Talonvor looks at her. He's like, you threatened to harry me with a stick if I didn't come. She's like, that's sweet talking? What are you talking about?
That's how Lenny sweet talks. I do think it would be funny, though, to, pick... Like, I bet Lenny, as a youngin', was a looker. I guarantee it. And then I like this line. Had she not... Once she's alone, she sends Lenny off to get Talonvor. The urge was still, comes back on to go obey him. And she has this line of, had she not known better, she could have thought that you'd used the one power on her in some way, but no man who could channel survived to his age, unless they're forsaken.
Right, but I mean, her logic is good. There's no way that she knows of that a male channeler could have lived to be middle-aged, which is what Ravine appears to be.
But she does recognize the effects of compulsion. She is like, this feels like compulsion, and she's very right.
It's just like, yeah.
This feels like something is happening to me externally. And then I feel like we get some good history here in this next paragraph. I don't know if you wanted to read this, but sort of a summary of her perspective of what happened, basically over her rule. The marrying of Terengil when Tigraine disappeared, Tom helping her out, and then becoming court bard, and then becoming her lover, his vanishing, and how she interpreted that when he went off to help his nephew. And then she calls Gareth Bryn a treasonous fool. I think that's compulsion talking.
Yes.
Because from his perspective, she lashes out at him for no reason.
I think it's sort of twisted around to make a lie out of the truth in a way. Mm-hmm. So I think, and I'm going to be totally honest, I don't quite remember what Morghese's reasoning was for sending him away exactly, but I believe it had something along the lines of him openly questioning her, which we see from her perspective later. Bladen says he opposed Gabriel, which I totally believe.
Yeah.
Like he would be doing that more and more in Morghese's state, and we see from her perspective later that he did this all the time, and it's one of the reasons she kept him around, because he gives good advice and he questions her when she's, going down the wrong path. That's what you want in any kind of advisor. You want someone that, no matter if you own a business or something, you still want employees that can be like, well, but have you looked at it this way?
Right. And what Gabriel does is say, hey, that's not helpful, that's actually treasonous, and makes that in her head treason. And it's like, no, that's
question
actually
you in front of people and
right
undermine your authority. Yeah,
get rid of him.
Right, which you could spin it that way. I see how you could spin it like that, but he's actually being a good subject, being a good advisor. And I mean, it's Bryn. Come on, he's like, He's like the most honorable, good dude.
Totally. I mean, he's a big part of Egwene's power base when she is taking over the White Tower. You know, people don't think about that, but like, she has the aid of the armies, and that gives her so much power over the tower. She has this huge sort of, I wouldn't call it a nuke in her back pocket, but an ace in the hole in her back pocket, and that is Gareth Bryn. Like, we know
it's true, and Bryn scares people, which
totally
we see here as Margase is thinking about what the hell she's going to do. One of her first lines of attack is to go get Bryn back, because she knows he'll come back if she demands it. And if Bryn is at her side, all the other nobles will shudder in fear. Like, you don't want to go against Bryn.
And he'll raise an army. And we see him do that, you know,
and he'll win.
Right. That's like, oh, Bryn's fighting. Yeah, I want to be on that side. Like, he's gonna win. I want to be there. Like, that's just, I don't care who he's fighting for or what he's fighting for. Like, he's gonna win. So yeah, let's join his team.
Wait, is Bryn is back at his estates now? While I was reading this, I was thinking he was away at this point, but he is still chasing them.
He is.
Yeah, he hasn't caught them yet. Because in the last chapter, Swan goes into the, like, Watt strip club, for lack of a better, where, like, you know, she tries to talk to the owner of the inn, and the owner of the inn's like, "Show me your legs, girl." That whole thing.
Oh, yeah. And that's after they encounter Bryn.
And he's still chasing them.
He's chasing them. So he's not at his estates at all. She would never, ever find him, even if she made it there.
Right.
That the reason that she was never able that she turned to the White Cloaks is that she went to where Bryn was, and he'd already left because he was chasing down Suon. Yes, cause and effect.
Explicit, but she thinks about all the mistakes she's made with men, and she lists lovers that she's gone through over the many years. You know,
I think that's pretty explicit.
Here's how I messed up this one. Here's how I messed up that one. Yeah, it's not like a hot bedroom scene, obvious.
Right. It's we don't have a scene of them, like, you know, making sweet, hot, passionate love on the steps of the Iron Throne while a small boy watches, right? Like, this isn't Game of Thrones.
It's spelled out for you in the most obvious way RJ will ever spell anything out.
Right.
You have to, yeah.
And so meanwhile, she's trying to deny that she has any feelings for this hot young thing who's eyeing her low-cut dress by calling him young Talonvor.
Yeah, I'm pretty convinced that's why she keeps calling him boy, because when she looks at him earlier, she's like, a well-built young man. Like, she likes what she's looking at.
Oh, yeah. He's got shoulders. I don't know why he puts up with her shit, but, you know.
He's in love with her.
And, you know, he's seen her be a effective leader for a long time. It's only recently that he's seen that change. And so he doesn't know, I don't know if he understands. I think he clearly fell in love with her before she went crazy with Gabriel.
Yes, I think so. And Linny calls her out on it. She's like, why do you keep calling him boy when he's not there later? Why do you keep calling him boy? Like, it just upsets him. You know, there's no reason for that.
He's like, he is young. He's like, not that young. He was, you know, probably born when I'm thinking maybe 10 at the oldest. There's a 10-year gap there between Talonvor and Queen Morgase. Because Queen Morgase is 40-ish.
I'm not sure exactly, but Linny says, why do you keep calling him young? Linny demanded. It just puts his back up. Morgase says, he is young, Linny. Young enough to be my son. Linny snorted. He has a few years on Galad, and Galad is too old to be yours. You were playing with dolls when Talonvor was born. So whatever that means. I don't know how long she was playing with dolls for, but she's implying that he's not that young. He's a little younger than you.
Morgase was born in 957, so that makes her 41, 42, depending on exactly what year it is. I don't have a date of birth on Talonvor, so let me see if we have one on Galad.
Galad will probably have one.
Born 970.
Oh, that's 13 years.
Between the two of them, yeah.
That's a big gap, but it's not unprecedented or anything.
And she said that Talonvor is older than Galad. So that means that it's less than 13 years between them.
Oh, right. Okay.
So it's, yeah. So
that's what I was thinking, like maybe like 7. Like kind of a big gap, but not really. Not enough to...
Right. I'm going to say less than a decade, for sure.
That's what I was thinking.
But she definitely could not have possibly been Talonvor's mother. And yeah, like when you're 40, like the difference between 30 and 40 is just not that big.
Especially as you get older, that amount of time seems less and less important.
It really does.
Rauco is asking if Margase has any slowing from the power.
Yeah, so she doesn't look ageless, but she does look younger than she actually is. So she probably, even though she's 40, looks closer to 30 or even late 20s. So she may actually look the same age as Talonvor, even though she's a decade older.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before. And because she's so weak in the power, she may be slowed only to the degree that she just looks surprisingly young for her age. You know what I mean? So, like, not so much that maybe anyone would ever notice.
Right, that she may live to be 120 as opposed to the 100 that she would normally.
Yeah.
There's very, very little slowing. But slowing is different than the ageless look, right? And that's an important distinction to always make here. Slowing is just you look younger, you are younger than your natural age. And that's because channelers live to be older than normal people. So they have to age slower.
We've talked about this in kind of in the same respect with Nynaeve as well. I think we made a theory a while back that that's one of the reasons people call Nynaeve, like, she looks so young all the time.
Right, because she slowed very early. Because she started channeling very early and using a lot of power when doing it.
She's only like 25, but if she slowed even a little, she might look like a teenage girl, you know?
Right. No, I always imagine her as looking, 18, 19, 20-ish, even though she's 25. Yeah. There's a lot of floating in this chapter, because I feel like there is a lot of repetition as she's sort of going through the same thoughts over and over in her head.
Glazing over some of the more obvious conversation. I don't think we need to explain that when he's like, are you sick? What's wrong with you? Maybe I should call for an Aes Sedai. All this.
Right. We know that the new oath is to the throne and the law, not the queen, which means probably going to overthrow the queen for the throne and put Gabriel in it. She has a memory of trying to leave twice and being halted by Gabriel, so we know she's like tried to get out before. And I was just curious, do we have any idea why Talonvor knows Basil Gill? What's the relationship there? He's just like, oh yeah, I know Basil Gill. I'm like, really? Why?
Maybe he just hangs out in the bar. I don't know. Because he's a loyalist, you know?
Right, and the Queen's blessing is a loyalist bar?
Yeah, I just kind of... That's what's in my head, and I just sort of shrugged it off. I don't know that it's ever explained, like, how they met exactly.
I was curious if maybe Talonvor tracked Rand down after he left, and that's how went to the inn where he was staying.
It could be. But I was thinking, during the riots and whatnot, or as the riots are kind of cooking, simmering to a boil there, when Rand and Mat are still in the city, it's all about people who are loyal to Morgase or kind of anti-White Tower. Those are like the two factions. Mm-hmm. And so it wouldn't have surprised me if Talonvor started hanging out in loyalist bars. And then, So you remember a fight even starts to break out when Rand is in the Queen's Blessing because it is a loyalist bar, and that's the smaller faction. Right.
And then they all stand up and threaten. Isn't that all the regulars are basically yo?
Yeah. And Lamgwin's there.
Oh, and you know what? And that's right. Basil Gill is old friends with Tom. Tom would know a lot of people in court. So Basil clearly probably has connections in court. That I would say is probably one of the few connections that I don't think Jordan has much support for. I think that was just oh yeah, I know this guy who's a loyalist. And I guess you could say just loyalists are going to find each other.
Yeah, he owns a bar near the palace that's known to be allied with that political faction, and it's not far-fetched, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I'm down with that. Sure.
And friends with Tom. I'm glad you pointed that out, because that kind of pulls everything together in a way.
That does. It feels a little loose to me, that's all. I wish he'd thrown a line about being found Basil Gill after running into Mat, or, found something like that. Somehow the Taviran twisting brought them together. But, I can imagine. I just wanted some evidence in the actual book.
Sure. I'm skimming through here, and Morgase basically says, Linny, can you get me a dress, a crummy dress that doesn't fit well, and rub a little soot on it, and
And she gets her the scratchiest dress she can find to punish her for getting that. We're in that
including a
silky
shift
look thing.
that's made out of rough wool.
It's got to be really unpleasant.
Morghese more than half suspected that her itchy, ill-draped dress was punishment for that gown, the kind of sexy cleavage gown she was wearing earlier. That I'm imagining, like, this isn't a little bit of cleavage. Like, I'm imagining, like, belly button cut, that kind of dress.
Oh, I'm imagining it too.
Because not just, I feel like even an Andorran woman of high birth might, you know, a little bit showy, just not Damani style.
Well, and she's dressing for Gabriel's pleasure, and he's got her dressed, I'm sure, in not an appropriate fashion for children. Let's put it that way.
Yes, I think that's right. It's Talonvor's idea to go to the Queen's blessing, and they kind of split up, and Linny and Morghese walk through the streets.
Linny gives them the down low on how Talonvor, like, cut his arm open and swore to her in the old fashion. Very primitive. And that's why she knew who Talonvor was, because she, like, found out who was this guy who did that crazy swearing.
Right, he was made to swear the new Ravine's new oath, which is to the throne
and country.
Andor,
yeah,
and not the Queen, which is what it used to be. Yeah, he re-swears his oaths by himself, and Linny saw him.
And then I get one of my favorite Linny quotes of all time. At my age, if I make it up, it's still an old saying. It's like, you made that up. It's not an old saying. If I make it up, it's still an old saying at my age. My favorite Linny quote of all time. Because then you know that, like, basically all of her other sayings, I bet a lot of them are made up. They're not like things she came up with, like, from ancient wisdom. It's just shit she made up on the spot. It's just bullshit. She's just an ultimate bullshitter, Linny is. She's just great.
Kind of, but, you know, what she says makes sense.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it comes from a place of wisdom, but it's not like the wisdom passed down through her ancestors. It's just like the wisdom of Linny telling your ass what you need to be doing right now.
That one was something about displaying wares he did not mean to sell, in reference to Morghese's dress.
I don't know, I think she was selling them to Gabriel pretty effectively, but maybe she doesn't want to advertise them to Talonvor.
On that next page, all I noted was Morghese notices that the grass was dying for lack of rain. And I just, RJ's giving us that little drop in most chapters now, where Leandrin noticed that in the last chapter.
Yeah.
That everything looks a bit dry.
Dry and hot. Summer. Yep. It's going a little longer and a little further.
Still
than you think.
Subtle, though.
Yeah.
You know, it's not weird for there to be a little brown grass in the middle of the summer. But to have it be everywhere at the same time, that's a little suspicious.
And then those drops just keep going when you're like, wait, it's winter. Why is it still hot? Stop that.
They go into the inn. Morghese meets Gil. They all kind of swear to her. Well, Gil, Lamgwin, Talonvor, and a woman named Brienne, who's Lamgwin's lady.
Do you know where we've met Brienne before?
No. In Cairhien?
In Cairhien.
Where?
Remember how when Rand was at the party, those three ladies cornered him with their big skirts, and Tom was like chuckling and is like, a night with any one of those ladies is going to give you
an education that every young man should have.
Exactly.
I remember that line, yeah.
One of those three ladies was Brienne.
Nice catch.
And so she ended up fleeing after the king was killed in the protests, came to Caemlyn and found Lamgwin. And I assume after some dirty, dirty sex, they decided to hang out together. I mean, just based on the stuff that, like, Tom was telling him about, because she was definitely, like, cheating on her husband and doing all that kind of crap and all the Game of Houses stuff. And now she's like, nope, I'm just loyal to this one man. Nothing subtle. Not playing any games. I am done with that Cairhien and game playing bullshit. I'm just loyal.
Nothing like losing everything to give you a little space to reinvent yourself.
Right.
Because I think that's what happened to her. She is a Cairhien, a noblewoman, but now she's a bouncer's girlfriend.
Right. In a bar. Who's going to follow her around a queen? Exiled queen, I guess? I do think she is a bit of a wasted character. She could have better lines. I'm going to see if I can pay attention to her now. Because she spends all that time hanging out with Queen Morghese in Perrin's camp. And, like, there's, Talonvor gets a lot of lines. The queen gets a lot of lines. Even Lamgwin and Master Gil, I feel like, have some bit of talking, but she's not explored.
Yeah, I agree. And I wasn't even going to point it out, but there's a point here where everyone kind of tells Morghese that they want to follow her, but Morghese goes to Lamgwin like, you might want to leave your lady friend behind. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be really dangerous. And Brienne says, I never knew a good man until I found Lamgwin, or until he found me. The loyalty and love he bears for you, I bear for him tenfold. He follows you, but I follow him. I will not stay behind.
Good for you. And Keith is pointing out here that she does give Morghese some pretty serious talk after her experience with Valda, when Valda basically had raped her. And she was like, yeah, you got raped, but at least you're still alive and have all your limbs. Like, live with it. And it's a bit of a harsh reality check when Morghese, I feel like, is coming close to giving up. So she does have that moment. But I feel like after that, I wish I'd heard more from her in Parents' Camp. Sort of see what her and Lamgwin's relationship was gonna be like. It's just, I feel like it doesn't, one of those things where, like, I'd love to see that going on in the background in the TV show.
Yeah, she's one of those, like, Theta characters that's in the background a lot, but we don't really know too much about.
No. But she is there for a lot of the big plot points.
She is, yeah.
Gil is like, so, my queen, where are we going? And she's like, I hadn't actually thought of that. Because, again, compulsion.
Yeah. Before she could open her mouth, Talonvor said, it must be Gareth Bryn. There is hard feeling against you among the great houses, my queen, but with Bryn following you, they will re-swear allegiance, if only because they know he will win every battle. He's saying you have to get Bryn back. If you get Bryn back, the houses will be afraid to go against what you ask of them now.
And it does say here they are riding hard for Core Springs, and that is Gareth Bryn's family home. So that is where they head for, is that Core Springs where we last saw Suon burn down a barn. So he's been gone, and so when they get there, when we next really meet up with Morghese, she is in Amador, as far as I can tell. So they must have gone... So at Core Springs, Morghese and her party find that Gareth Bryn is gone, so they continue west, and they end up heading for Amadisia.
That sounds right. I can't remember the plot line exactly.
And I don't always... It never made sense to me why she went to the White Cloaks. That was one of those things where I was like, why did she end up with the White Cloaks? I know they kept heading west, but man, it seems... I guess it almost seems like they got caught by King Aelron.
I don't remember how that plot line plays out.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think we have to put it together kind of off screen or from...
I think that's right. I'm going to look really quick to see if I can find anything.
She's thinking about going to Gildon, but the rumors of Massima dissuade her.
Morghese goes to King Aelron, actually, and then Pedron Neal kind of intercepts her, because Aelron is
a puppet of the king, or of
Neal.
The White Cloaks. Yeah. Right? I'm like, she knows going to the king would be like going straight to the White Cloaks. But I guess she tried everybody else, because they travel across Altara.
And she's out of relevant options, like, where is she going to go?
Right.
Unless she goes to the Borderlands, which is possible. She could have gotten help, but it's a longer way.
And, like, I think she could have gone to the White Tower, but that would have been...
disastrous.
Bad for her.
Yeah.
And the compulsion kept her from doing that. She can't go to Kyrian, because they're her, traditional opponents. She's basically... Then they're falling apart.
If you look at the map of Western Andor, if she's somewhere in between Caemlyn and Baerlon, say, looking for help, I mean, she could turn north and head towards Saldea, but she doesn't have any ties with them. Aradomon is a shell of a kingdom. Tarabon is a shell of a kingdom. Amadisha is the only place nearby. Like, the next closest place is like Ilion.
Right.
Which is a lot further.
Right, and ruled by another Forsaken.
Right, there's not really anywhere safe to run. As horrible as it sounds, it may have been the safest possible decision she could have made, despite what happens to her. If she had gone anywhere else, she'd have ended up dead, I think. Most of these other places don't even have governments. Saldea's too far. She'd run into the same problem in Ilion that she did in Caemlyn.
Yeah, I'm nodding. Do you want to do Padden Fane's final little scene here where he gets the dagger back and wrap the sucker up? Or do you...
Night was when Padden Fane felt most comfortable. As he paddled through the tapestry-bedecked corridors of the White Tower, it seemed as though the darkness outside made a cloak to hide him from his enemies. Despite the stand lamps, gilded and mirrored, burning along his way, a false feeling, he knew. His enemies were many and everywhere. Right that moment, as in every waking hour, he could feel Rand al'Thor. Not where he was, but that he was still alive, somewhere. Still alive. It was a gift received at Shale Ghul in the Pit of Doom, that awareness of al'Thor. His mind skittered away from memories of what had been done to him in the pit. He had been distilled there, remade, but later, in Aradal, he had been reborn to smite old enemies and new. He could feel something else as he stalked the empty night hallways of the tower, a thing that was his, stolen from him. A sharper desire drew him at this moment than his longing for al'Thor's death, or the tower's destruction, or even revenge against his ancient foe, a hunger to be whole.
Yeah, he wants the dagger badly. And that's something that we see him think about, like basically once his plot in the Two Rivers fails, once Perrin breaks the Trollocs and he can't bring in any more because the Waygate's closed, he's like, fine, I'll go after my dagger. I want that thing back. And that's what we see him doing here, basically, which is sneaking into the White Tower and somehow dodging all detection into one of the most secure places in the world. That's a bit weird, but he does seem to have all sorts of powers.
He does, and it looks like he evades detection until he touches that door.
Agreed.
Because Fane is walking along, he feels the dagger, he picks a lock and opens it, and he's like, tee-hee-hee, and he's giggling to himself like he's in this super secure building full of Aes Sedai, and they only guarded this with a lock, with a iron lock. He opens it, gets the dagger, and
clearly there was a ward set on it, because it did bring the attention of one poor accepted who made the mistake of not actually rising the call and checking it out herself before waking anybody up.
Yeah, and he slashes her in the face, so she, how do I describe this? Screams, turns black, and boils alive, or something? That's basically what happens.
Yep, nothing dark in this show. Yep, no dark moments in this show at all.
I have to say, I'm so looking forward, and I've said many times, to, I really hope they do the scene where Matt cuts a guy with the dagger.
The Ch19?
In Falma, yeah.
Yep.
And the two sides are about to fight, and Matt cuts somebody with a dagger when they try to grab him, and he just, like, everybody's silent as the man, like, falls and screams and writhes in agony and slowly turns black. Everybody's just staring. I imagine this, like, empty, silent, big hall where it's just echoing, and they're all just staring in horror. It's just so good.
Yeah, no, and then...
it's so metal.
It's great. It's like, we are not easy meat, is then what Matt says. Like,
yeah.
And then the real fight begins.
Just how dramatic that is. The silence, except for this man's screams.
So many good scenes. I can't. I want them to visualize them very well. I can't wait to see them.
In any case, that happens to the accepted. He, like, slashes her and, like, drags her into the room and shuts the door or whatever. And
he's all about, like, rebonded with the dagger, the thing that gave him life. Like, that is the thing he needed to be complete, because he needs a piece of Shadar Logoth. He's got the soul of Mordeth in him, but there's also the soul of Mashadar that's sunk into the physicalness of Shadar Logoth, the evil that's sunk into every piece of it, and so he needs a piece of that dagger, a piece of Shadar Logoth, to carry with him to make him whole. And he can't go back to Shadar Logoth to get another piece because he may be trapped again.
Yeah.
And that's why he wants his dagger so badly. And that's what allows him to continue to evolve and suck up souls and actually become, like, a new Mashadar.
Yeah.
But yeah, right now I do think he's vulnerable. I think Leandrin could just have wasted him.
Alviarin is the one that shows up.
Sorry, Alviarin. I was reading what Murtok said. You threw me off.
We were just talking about Leandrin a lot.
Yeah, she was just, this is, the last symbol in the last chapter was the Black Aja faces. So this is all about sort of the evil. This is almost like a little prologue in the middle. Oh yeah, Alviarin definitely didn't know who Fane was. He just sort of spouts off his stuff about, I've seen the pit of Shale Ghul, and she's like, whoa, you must be a high-ranking dark friend. And he was, before he left.
Right. The young woman lay thrashing on the stone floor, trying and failing to scream. Her hands clawed at a face already black and bloated beyond recognition, the dark swelling oozing down onto her shoulders like thick oil. Her snowy skirts, banded in colors at the hem, flailed as her feet scrabbled uselessly. He licked at a splash of blood on his hand and giggled as he picked up the sheath. "You are a fool." He spun, dagger reaching, but the air around him seemed to turn solid. "And it's Alviarin," she says. "Did you really think," the Aes Sedai went on, "that there would be no guard on this room? No watch kept? A ward was set on that lock. That young fool's task tonight was to monitor it. Had she done as she was supposed to, you would find a dozen warders and as many Aes Sedai outside this door now. She is paying the price of her stupidity."
And I looked her up, and she doesn't appear in any scenes before or after this one. I think she's just random accepted. Although she does get a name, Vereen. Poor Vereen. Should have called for help.
Fane knows she's Black Aja right away because, she doesn't try to heal her. She doesn't try to attack Fane. She just stands there and talks to him as this poor girl thrashes and dies on the floor.
And she hasn't raised the alarm. That's the big one, too.
Oh, right, yeah. "I could dispose of Elida for you. One touch of this, and even healing will not save her." He tried to gesture with the dagger, but could not budge it a hair. If he could have moved it, Alviarin would be dead by now. "You could be first in the tower, not second." She laughed at him. Cool, contemptuous chimes. "Do you think I would not be the first if I had wished it? Second suits me. Let Elida claim credit for what she calls successes, and sweat for her failures too. I know where the power lies. Now answer my questions, or 2 corpses will be found here in the morning instead of 1. There would be 2 in any case, whether he answered her with suitable lies or not. She did not mean to let him live. I have seen Thakandar. Saying that hurt. The memories it brought were agony. He refused to whimper, forced the words out. The great sea of fog, rolling and crashing in silence against the black cliffs, the fires of the forges glowing red beneath, and lightning stabbing up into a sky fit to drive men mad. He did not want to go on, but he made himself. I have taken the path down to the belly of Shale Ghul, down the long way with the stones like fangs brushing my head, to the shore of a lake of fire and molten rock. That holds the great Lord of the Dark in its endless depths. The heavens above Shale Ghul are black at noon with his breath. Alviarin was standing upright now, eyes wide, not fearful, but impressed. "I have heard of—" she began softly, then shook herself and stared at him piercingly. "Who are you? Why are you here? Did one of the Chosen send you? Why was I not informed?" He threw back his head and laughed. "Are the tasks given to the likes of me for the likes of you to be knowing?" The accents of his native Lugard were strong again. In a way, it was his native city. "Do the Chosen confide everything in you, then?" Something inside seemed to shout that this was not the way, but he hated Aes Sedai, and that something inside him did too. "Be careful, pretty little Aes Sedai, or they'll be giving you to the Murdral for its sport." Her glare was icicles stabbing his eyes. "We shall see, Master Fane. I will clear away this mess you have made, and then we shall see which of us stands higher with the Chosen." Eyeing the dagger, she backed from the room. The air around him did not soften until she had been gone a full minute. Silently, he snarled at himself. Fool, playing the Aes Sedai game, groveling for them, then one moment of anger to ruin it all. Sheathing the dagger, he nicked himself, and licked the wound before sticking the weapon under his coat. He was not at all what she thought. He had been a dark friend once, but he was beyond that now. Beyond it, above it, something different, something more. If she managed to communicate with one of the Forsaken before he could dispose of her, better not to try. No time to find the Horn of Valir now. There were followers awaiting him outside the city. They should still be waiting. He had put fear into them. He hoped some of the humans were still alive. Before the sun rose, he was out of the tower, off the island of Tarvalon. Althor was out there, somewhere, and he was whole again.
The stuff from his perspective is so creepy.
Yeah, it's written well.
He knows he leaves the Horn of Valir behind, which is good, I guess. He doesn't really have much interest in it. It's just like, meh. The only reason he really stole it before is because the dagger was in there. Wasn't he trying to, still get back into the Dark Friend's good side at that point? And the Dark One's good side and, bring him the horn? Or no, he ended up trying to sell it to the to Ch19 for power. His motivation is fucking weird. It's very hard to follow sometimes because, he's crazy.
Yeah, well written crazy.
So after a long discussion of pizza selfies, we are back at it.
If you enjoy taking pizza selfies, feel free to email them to us.
Show us your pizza. And I want to see pictures of a pizza you've made. I don't want to see a picture that you ordered or bought somewhere. It's got to be a homemade pizza.
Whoa. That's a high
That's
bar.
what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I'm tired of these professional pizza selfies. I don't want to see the professional ones. I want amateur pizza selfies. Because if I want to see professionally made pizza, I can go online and Google professionally made pizza. That's available. I don't need you to send that to me.
I am a pizza professional. Wonder if anyone has ever said that before. Googling professional pizza just to see what happens.
Isn't that a line in, what was it, Snow Crash? He's a professional pizza delivery boy? Was that the...
Oh yeah, I read that book just a little while back. That was cool. It was weird, which, I like, so.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?